Okay, I'll explain what they're for in a minute. I'm going to give you some tricky words, and I wonder, do you know what the word means? So here we go. Anyone know what that word, can anyone say it first of all? Pernicious. But it's not the easiest of words. You'd have to look at it and go, wait a minute, I don't use that every day. Any idea what the word means? So I can't. That's even worse. It was something that's harmful, isn't it? Yeah? That's the idea of something that can do damage to you, that's dangerous or harmful. Now, just for the under 50s. What about that one? Any idea how you'd say that one?
Abnegation.
Abnegation. I think some people think they're under 50 when they're not, but never mind. Young at heart. Do we know what that word means? Well, that word means to deny something. To denial or reject a doctrine or belief was the definition I found online. What about this word? Umbrage. It's quite onomatopoeic, isn't it? It sounds like the sort of attitude that goes with it. It means sort of anger at being offended. And all three of those words have something to do with the Bible passage that Fred just read for us. But I'm going to give you an even harder word that is so hard, it's not included in that reading. Do you know what it is? It's this. Sorry. We're in the last of our series of stories right from the beginning of the Bible. Fred read for us what is the last one. We're going to move on, go back to Matthew next week. But we're going to find out from that story, thinking very quickly now, what happens when sorry really is a word that's so hard to say that it's not said. What happens when it becomes an impossible word? And so, as we think about the story, as usual, I have three questions. What does Cain do? Now, you probably grasped that from just listening to the reading. Why did he do it? Maybe slightly less clear at first glance. And third question, what should he have done? And because the Bible always talks to us as well as to the time it was written, what should we do? Okay? Right, well, let's just get the story straight in our head. Adam and Eve had a baby boy. Eve recognized that it was God keeping one of his promises that had been made in the midst of the fall that we thought about a few weeks ago, and they named him Cain. Later, they had another boy and called him Abel. When they grew up, Cain looked after the ground and grew things. Abel looked after sheep. He was a shepherd. When it was time for harvest, Cain presented something of his crops, a little bit like we sort of put on there last week, as a gift to the Lord. And Abel did something similar with the firstborn lambs of his flock. And that's where everything starts to unravel, because what we're told is Abel's sacrifice is good and God accepts it. But Cain's is not accepted. And that leaves Cain feeling very angry and dejected. So God asks him, why are you so angry? You'll be fine if you do what's right. But if you refuse to do what's right, well, sin is crouching at your door. Funny picture to say. It's eager to control you. But you must subdue it and be its master. But the story tells us Cain didn't sort out his jealousy. And one day, Cain suggested to his brother, let's go out to the field. And while they were there, Cain attacked his brother and killed him. God speaks again. He says to Cain, where is your brother Abel? I don't know, it's not my job to keep track of him, says Cain. And so God asks him, what have you done? Your brother's blood cries from the field to me. In other words, God knows. God knows everything. He didn't ask because he didn't know. He asked because Cain had a chance to say a hard word. But he didn't. And so God's punishment was a curse, a punishment on Cain. He has to leave Gardening becomes hard. Producing food becomes harder. And he would be a wanderer across the earth, separated from his family. Cain thinks the punishment's too hard. He doesn't like it. And so God says, well, it's okay. It won't be as bad as you think. They won't kill you. And so Cain ends up leaving God's presence and settles in a foreign land. And God gives Adam and Eve another baby boy. After all, they've just lost both boys that they had, through whom the family and the world will continue. And Eve gives him the name Seth. Well, in between those two things, the Cain leaving and and Seth being born, we find the story of Cain's family. And it's a story of wandering and of his children, and it tells us what they were like. And whilst there's a few good things, it's not good. Overall, the picture goes downhill. And it's all because Cain didn't use that hard word that God would always listen to. Let's think about it. It started going wrong when Abel's offering was accepted and Cain's was not. Let's assume, it's fair to assume, that they've been told about the careful Creator and his wonderful world by their parents, the first two people who lived in the wonderful garden world that God had made for them, who had been in a relationship garden, had it ruined, and now, courtesy of them, all of humanity was suffering God's curse. They're clearly believing God. They offer things to him. And let's think about it. So I've got two glasses to help us think about it. We're going to call this one Abel. Okay, this is Abel's glass. Okay, this represents Abel. And the glass represents their heart. So we can tell the difference. There we go. There's Cain. And you see, the reason God accepts one offering and not the other is found in the way it's phrased. Because we read that God accepted Abel and his sacrifice. God didn't accept Cain. Because God knows the heart. He knows whether we're doing things because we want to, because we love him, or because we just feel we have to. Cain gave some fruit. Abel gave the fat and the first, which basically means the best. And so when Abel's sacrifice is accepted and Cain's is rejected, we actually get to see something of what God sees. So let's call this rejection, okay? And look what happens to Cain when his offering is rejected. Let's see if I got the right amount that it doesn't go everywhere. There we go. You see, because Cain's heart is clearly not right with God. He doesn't accept what God says. He thinks God's wrong. He's like, what, how dare you not accept what I've given you? But at any point, the story could have changed. What could Cain have done? Any ideas? He could have said sorry. But instead, he keeps going. And when God sort of challenges him and sort of says, what's going on? What have you done? Why are you angry? He doesn't pay attention. And so actually we find a slippery slope that's caused by sin. You see, let me get the right page. When his offering wasn't accepted, Cain became angry and became jealous. When God spoke to Cain about his anger and his jealousy, he offers him a way back. He could go, actually, that is wrong, I'm sorry. And everything could go back to the beginning. But he doesn't. He could have said sorry. He doesn't. Well, then he deceives Abel, says, let's go to the field. I'm sure we didn't tell him, let's go to the field so I can kill you. That's not good either. And then God speaks to him. Oh, sorry, no, then he kills him. Oops, another one. And then when God asks him, he lies as well. And so on the diagram, where has Cain ended up? He's at the bottom of a slippery slope, isn't he? But the thing is, if he'd have turned back to God and used that very hard word, remember which way to pull it, he could have gone back to the beginning. And anybody who uses that really hard word, that's hard to say and hard to mean, well, knows that God will listen to them. At any stage, Cain could have said that hard word, but he chose not to. And so his family and his life have consequences. Now for us, it's always possible to end up doing wrong things. But it is also always possible to return to God and say sorry. Sin is always crouching, waiting to take hold of what we do. And so often one wrong thing leads to another, like the slope behind me. And in those situations, saying sorry to God is the only safe thing to do. Even though it's hard, and it might feel like climbing back up a slope, it's always better than remaining in sin and a broken relationship between us and God, and us and other people too. So, as much as it might be a hard word, what is the most important word that we need to remember and use? Sorry. You can use it any time, but it's important, and the Bible urges us to say it as soon as possible. Say sorry to God for ignoring him, and he will forgive us.